Welcome back everyone to AI application development using Azure and OpenAI. Today, I'm going to talk about how you start building in your dev environment, which we set in the part 3. So this is the part 3 video of the series. And in this, we will see a couple of things like how the OpenAI keys, etc., we can use in our config file and then continue building that in our application. So let's dive into that. So we have created um, code space in the GitHub. So let me take you back to that environment, right? And then you can see that essentially I have got here is the test file. So I can close this file, and then I basically then what we can do, we can start taking creating few things up here. So first of all, we need configuration file. And then that configuration file will be sitting here as an invisible file or a hidden file, but it will hold the key value pair, right? So remember that we created an OpenAI model, right? And that model basically got deployed, and we know the name of the model because we choose the model, right? So what we'll bring in now, we'll bring in a couple of things. We'll bring in the setup keys, which essentially are the thing which we can pass to our application at runtime dynamically. We could hard code it, when we can just start writing that code in a Python file, and that will work. But let me show you how these keys work. I will get to see this key in the documentation of our GitHub page, but let me create that. So we'll say .env, the default name. You can give any name, but then when you are going to load, you're gonna tell that in this. So it requires a couple of things. It requires the OpenAI version and the OpenAI key. I'll show you step by step how you can bring that OpenAI key, etc. So you have that key over here. So I'll copy the key and I just go ahead and paste it here. So the key comes here. And then I need the endpoint. So if I go back to my Azure portal and I go to the resource group, and in then that resource group, I have that OpenAI service. When I open the OpenAI service, I just copy that endpoint here. I just went ahead and so it created in the East US region. So you can see that it's kind of like showing up over here, the URL, which is the REST API call, which I'm going to make. And the model which I'm going to get is the model which I got deployed here. So I'll go to the list of deployments, and I see the deployment name, and the model name matches, which is intentional so that I don't have to copy and paste them twice. So I choose this model name and the deployment name. They are same, right? You could have a different deployment name for the same model just to identify for what purpose that model is being used. Is it a dev? Is it UAT? Is it production? So you can give that alias of your model you're going to deploy. The model remains the standard name. You cannot change it. It's what you have selected, but the deployment name is all yours. Okay, this part is all yours. So this is the environment which you're going to load in our Python file. Now we can do in hello.py to load that and then test it over here. But we're gonna do what we're gonna do is that we're gonna use a Jupyter notebook. So I'll say that say my demo, and I create IPynb as a Python notebook, and you can see that it's detecting the kernels, and it might ask me like which one you're gonna use, right? So I'll go ahead and choose the Python once it detects it. But while it is trying to detect, what I'm gonna do is that now I'm gonna load couple of important libraries which I need in my dev machine. So in my dev machine, let me clear it up. Use this thing. In my dev machine, I need pip install. Okay, I just made it history, and I say OpenAI. This is one library. I can do it one by one, or I can say Python dev that .NET .env. So to load the environment variables, I need LangChain. So we'll come back later when we need them, but we'll say LangChain, OpenAI, and then Streamlit. That's the file we need, right? Shall we hit enter? And then if I hit enter, it's gonna go ahead and install all the libraries in my machine. Uh, this Python notebook, I will select that, let it select it. Now let me test that Python. So I'll close the terminal window and then I run some test command. Yeah. Hello. If I hit enter, it's going to go ahead and print in the screen itself. That's a beauty, right? So I can have block code and then keep testing things over here. It's very easy and it's very common in the world of data science where people have to do. So don't write the Python file, they write the Python notebook, and you can even print it as a document and then use it. So I'm going to do one by one. Step number one. So I'm going to document it, okay? So that you see the thing. So let me clear it up. And this is the markdown documentation. So I'll say uh, Azure OpenAI demo. Okay. And if I hit enter, it's going to go ahead and give me a markdown page, which is cool, right? And then I just add one more markdown below. And this time I'll put a subsection saying that import. Now, when I import it, right, I need to hit here. And I just say code. This is where I write the code. Now you see that I can put comment and becomes sort of like a documentation. So I'll say import OpenAI. So we'll use the raw OpenAI first. Now if I hit enter, it's going to go ahead and run the oh, N. There's an N missing. So it will run that import and it is successful. So it is fine, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and add a markdown. And I say that load the con I'll my config file. If I load the config file here, and then I go ahead and say add code. How do I load the config file? So to do that, I need to import a couple of things. So I need to say that import OS, and then I need to say import dot um, not import. I'll say from dot environment import load dot net. This is gonna go ahead and load that, right? Now, that file might be missing in my folder. So it assumes that that file.env is there. So I have to check it. But otherwise, if we do this simple thing, it's going to go ahead and load it, right? So I'll add few additional checks here just to make sure that it is getting properly loaded. If missing, then it'll say it is missing. So I'll say print loaded the .env else. should be in line as tapped. No end file found. Now, when it is loaded the file, not only it will load the file, it will also say that what base point I have. So let me say OpenAI base EP endpoint. Okay, a little shortcut, and I'm gonna go ahead and get the not the key. So we need the Azure OpenAI endpoint. So I'll cut that out. I go to this environment and I use the Azure OpenAI endpoint. So what I'm going to do is that I'll go here, paste it the OpenAI endpoint. So it's going to go ahead and load it, and it will load the file name. So let me run this part. Okay. If I run this part, there's an extra bracket. So let me remove this. Run this part. You can see it's loaded the environment variable. It's getting the file name from there. All right. It's the URL from the file. So it's properly happening. All good, right? Everything is fine. Now this time, I'm going to go ahead and add a markdown. And then I'm going to go ahead and say, I am now going to test the Azure OpenAI API. And I add the code. Here, I will say from. Now, these are the code which I'm writing here to test. I'll use it in my final application. So I can copy paste here. So I'm going to write it properly. So from OpenAI, import Azure OpenAI. Okay. So the OpenAI library which you imported could also be used, but let's say that I'm only using the part of it. So I can just do that way. And then I will build a client. And in that client, I'm going to say it is Azure OpenAI. And I will do step by step. So I'll use Azure endpoint. Now, this key, let me check if this is correct. So this is Azure Open API key, AI API key. Let me go to that. I'll change it to Azure OpenAI API key. And I then need not sorry, this has to be changed. So let me do one thing. Let me keep it down. And here I need os dot get environment, that is Azure OpenAI development environment. The second one is the key. So I'll say API key equal to this key, that is correct. And then I'll say API version, um, let me use this Azure OpenAI API version. And let me take that OpenAI API version. It's not Azure, okay? So let me come back here, change this to this, okay? So the client is ready. Okay, we can test the client and check if everything is fine. It is fine. There is no output required. There is no output. Now we can now test the thing. Now we can say response. So it's a chat completion API. So I can say that client.chat.completions.create. Okay. And here I'm gonna go ahead and pass a couple of other information. In this section, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna say model, which model I'm gonna use. And again, I'm going to say that is get p, and I use the model name, pick it up from the environment file that is Azure OpenAI completion model. Okay, so I go ahead and paste it here. All right, and then I will say messages. After that, what message? Now remember here, I'm just testing it, okay? So that I want to make sure that all the things which I created are all working fine. So I've got this area, and here I'm going to say that for the message, I want to define a role, and the role is assistant. Assistant, and I'm going to define the content. And the content is, how can I help you today? Let's say that, okay? Or the one thing, let me just use a different way, okay? Let's say the one thing that I'd like to do is, so that it finishes. I put a space. So that's kind of like done at this point in time, right? And then let me run this block. There's nothing because I need to print it. So let me print the response. Now you can see that the printing is happening. It's a quite lengthy one. So instead of that, I will say print.response.choices.messages.content. Okay, so it'll bring the first one, which will be more readable. So you can see that I have got this travel and world, blah, blah, blah. So all these things coming up here, right? So travel and world experience, different cultures, which is good, right? So that's kind of like working. So it is a proof that my config file is loaded, right? And then it is able to connect to the OpenAI service using the OpenAI SDK. And then it is able to call that model as per the model's behavior. So every model has its purpose. So I call this chat completion, use the chat completion model, use that, and then did that little interface. So with this, I want to wrap it up here, this part. We'll come back to our next session. Till then, thank you very much for watching.